once I won the award and I realized like how much, support was out there, that's what essentially tipped me to looking into how can I get involved? What can I do? And the one thing that I was, really consistent with early on was just supporting others. I loved the industry. I loved the people in it. And I was, suddenly exposed to just so much content beyond what I knew was out there. And so I naturally just wanted to support others. I guess professionally, that's what I did.
Hey guys, welcome to the How I Got Here podcast. I am your host, Travis Waters, and I created this podcast to share stories that are worth telling. Whether it's somebody going from zero to hero, hero to zero, or simply something in between. On today's episode, we're joined by Dr. Kevin Murray, who you may know from his popular award-winning fantasy football podcast. We get to learn about how he actually started early on with the interest in sports broadcasting, how that shifted into the medical field, and then back into sports broadcasting thereafter. Let's go ahead right now and jump into that story with him. I hope you guys enjoy. Hey guys, this is the How I Got Here podcast. I'm your host, Travis Waters, and on this episode, we are joined by Mr. Kevin Murray. Now, Kevin, if someone is not familiar with you by name or by face, let's do a very short and sweet, quick, high-level overview of where you are right now at this point in 2025, whether it's like job title, company you're working with, all that stuff.
Yeah, on the fantasy front, the biggest thing right now is I just came out with the book, The Commissioner's Playbook. Essentially, it's a guide for fantasy football commissioners and enthusiasts of the game that just want to make their fantasy football leagues better. That's my background in this space. It's been a fun journey getting here. Obviously, we're going to get into that, but really, it's the fantasy football guide for commissioners, the Commissioner's Playbook. That's the book. I founded Fantasy Football Unlimited, got a podcast that I run through that where I do a lot of background interviews of fantasy football experts and analysts. I also work with football guys, do a lot of good stuff with them. They're an incredible company. Love to share more about football guys. And on the professional side, I'm a chiropractor. I've been for 20 plus years. So there's a lot of intricacies when it comes to my path.
For anybody who's watching the video version of the show on our YouTube channel, I think seeing you and your background, like your literal background, I think you saying that you run your own podcast was like the least shocking thing we've ever heard, because that is the epitome of a podcast setup. So we definitely love to see stuff like that. So normally I go straight from that to my first starting question, but I'm curious. So I don't think I've ever heard of a book that is specific to running a fantasy football league or fantasy league in general. So like myself, I don't know if you, for everybody that watched episode 1 of my first story of me getting this space, that I publish books teaching like the super day one beginners how to play fantasy football, because they're getting invited by their coworkers. They have no idea what's going on. They need to know like what the heck does waiver mean and all these other things. But you created a book specific not to fantasy football, but to people who are running a league. Is that right?
That is right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of publications out there when it comes to, you know, being better at the game or winning, competing in fantasy. But to me, the foundation of the fantasy experience, it's the league, right? It's the home league experience. It's the camaraderie. It's the connections that are made in a fantasy league, right? When people fall in love with the game of fantasy, it's usually that route. And for me, that's just been my passion for many years. I want to help people make better fantasy leagues, just more engagement, more fun, so people can get the most out of the game.
I'm curious, is there a rule in there that says don't go on a power trip and veto every trade that you don't like, even if you're not involved in it?
Yeah, we definitely touch on vetoes in this book.
Because I feel like, if people are like, oh, hey, I have this option to say, no, I don't like this trade. And I've actually seen that done a few times. I was like, all right, I can't play with you guys anymore. But anyway, so let's kind of get on the chronological train here, the timeline.
Sure.
The question we always love leading off with is rewind as early as your memory allows. The very, very, very first time that you had an idea of, I am interested in this, or this is what I want to be when I grow up. So what was that thought, and what was the age range that you had that idea?
Yeah, if I go back to elementary school, there's two paths. I loved baseball, loved playing baseball. I wanted to play professional baseball. That didn't work out. But I also realized maybe at that early age, if I didn't become a professional baseball player, I loved broadcasting. Honestly, I loved, instead of watching cartoons, I was watching Sports Center. So, Chris Berman and Dan Patrick and everything about Sports Center was everything to me. And so I thought about, that's kind of the path I thought I was going to go is sports broadcasting.
So I think we had somebody else who's in the broadcasting side of things on a previous episode who kind of I guess a yet to air episode, it's so interesting to me that was like the very very first thing, and you kind of just stuck with that the whole time. So I guess because we know that's essentially part of what you're doing now, and you also are a chiropractor. When you originally had this first idea of, the sports broadcasting thing is really interesting. I love to do this, even from a super early age. Were there what other things kind of came into the wheelhouse as you were getting older? Of, well, I really want to do this. This is still possible, but this new thing is really interesting as well. So maybe I'll consider both of them. What else kind of popped into your head along the way?
Yeah, I think early on again, just loving Sports Center, loving everything about sports. I mean, I figured somewhere along the line I'd like to do something in sports. I got, as I kind of grew up, teenage years, got more into health and fitness. And then through a few different relationships, I ran into, I kind of learned more about chiropractic. Essentially, my high school girlfriend, now wife, so high school sweethearts, her family, she was a gymnast, and she often would go to the chiropractor. I'm like, what is that? I don't know. And then her family, they had some friends whose son was in chiropractic school. So at the same time, I was kind of deciding which path I wanted to go with my kind of passion, my passion for health and fitness. I figured I could actually help athletes through healthcare too. So just deciding which direction I wanted to go, I thought, okay, I gotta at least meet some chiropractors, figure out more about it, learn some great things. Really, I met some really cool people that were in chiropractic that just were dialed in with sports. Um, Really kind of fit where I was thinking. So instead of going that direction of broadcasting, again, I just thought, okay, this is a path that, uh, you know, independent ownership. I think that that's a better path for me as opposed to working for some large outlet, right, in media. I thought, okay, being a business owner, that makes a lot of sense. I went the chiropractic route, and then down the road, this is where I kind of dove back into broadcasting. It's essentially, going your own route with podcasting. But it was really those early years where I had to decide what I was doing, where I felt like, the health route is a good route for me.
So my two questions that stem from that is specifically was the chiropractor route because you had somebody within your essentially social network that was already doing that. So were you like picking their brain on things and you're like, oh yeah, this does sound interesting, or was it something else unrelated to that relationship?
No, it was that relationship where my wife's family's friends, had a son that was in chiropractic school. The pivotal time I was deciding what direction to go. And he just, he really, gave me a lot of inspiration when it comes to that path and what that could do for, for a professional career. And that's the direction I went. The funny thing is, the first chiropractor that I met outside of of that relationship that really inspired me on what school to go to and whatnot. He ended up being in like an early fantasy football league of mine early on that was unrelated to those previous relationships. It's a kind of funny story how it all came together.
Yeah, it's two worlds that are unrelated, always kind of overlapping each other. So I know you mentioned that it seems like the main appeal is independency, business owner, controlling your own schedule, your own life. And I could only assume, but correct me if I'm wrong, that it was also that the financial side of it, where it's like, hey, like this is, I mean, we can not say guaranteed income because I mean, now that we've gone through COVID, we know anything's possible. But having the opportunity to know I can make a good amount of money doing this in sports broadcasting. I mean, at the time, unless you're like on ESPN, it's not necessarily paying an insane amount of money. Was that also a viewpoint of kind of why you went to the chiropractic side as your main focus?
Yeah, 100%. I did some, early looked into broadcasting, early on, saw some limitations with that. Again, like you said, unless you're, at the peak, there's some limitations. Whereas obviously I can control my own destiny on the route of entrepreneurship and owning a business, in kind of making my own path. So that was definitely something that I considered.
So right out of high school, well, I guess so. You said you're the high school sweetheart, so you have the relationship to the chiropractor within high school. So out of high school, was that kind of the first thing? It's like, okay, I finished high school. Now let me go to school so I can get my license to be a licensed chiropractor.
Yes, yes. So got into college, figuring out what I was gonna do, and that was it. It was basically let's get on a path towards getting everything undergraduate done so that I can go to chiropractic school. Yep.
And then still kind of having that original idea of the sports journalism side of things or broadcaster in the back pocket. So you finish school, you're a chiropractor, a practicing chiropractor, um, and then let's say, I mean, out of school, what are we looking at right now? Like age 22 when you start actually practicing?
No, I was 24. I think I graduated when I was 24.
Okay,
Right. So it's full 20 yeah, 24 was when I was done, just before 25. So
got
yep.
okay. So age 24, you're finishing school, and then at what point during your chiropractic journey does that itch, that inkling for the sports side of things that you've essentially put in your back pocket this entire time, when does that kind of start coming out? And you actually thinking about, how do I, now that I'm doing this and I'm successful with this, how do I also bring out this back pocketed interest? How did that kind of come back out?
Yeah, I think this is where the story gets more fun. I think so. Essentially, when I discovered fantasy football, I think it was 1995 or so. I was in high school, just absolutely loved the game. Right, it was so much fun. I was working part time. This is again in high school where some older guys. I was working at a Napa Auto Part distribution center, and there's a bunch of people there that played fantasy football. I had never really heard of it before. I played on my own in like some Yahoo or like a sporting news challenge. But I found out that these guys were playing fantasy football in my league at work, and I was just a kid. I found the commissioner, and I would leave like little post-it notes around his workstation, just with like like scribbles of fantasy stats and whatnot, and just to try to get them to invite me to find out that to learn that this kid loved this game and invite me into the league. And sure enough, it happened. So essentially, got into this fantasy football league, played it for a few years, and then when I started chiropractic school, I thought this is 2001 or so. I thought, this would be so much fun to start this career journey with this new crop of students in a fantasy football league. So I started a fantasy football league right when chiropractic school started, right? We basically, we played every sport for several years while we're in school. It was so much fun. I mean, we're in the computer labs, we're not studying, we're drafting teams, we're on the waiver wire. So fantasy was a big part of those early days. But then when I graduated, I mean, obviously that was my path, right? That was the passion, that was the direction I was going. So got out of school, started in a practice, several years go by, where obviously that's my professional direction. But I still loved fantasy, and once I got home, I converted the league that I created in the fantasy era at chiropractic school into a home fantasy football league up in the Pacific Northwest, because I was in the Seattle area. School was down in California, but I wanted to make a live draft, right? I wanted to have a live draft and just make it fun. And I had seen a few leagues that I was in just kind of go the wrong direction. Once I saw a commissioner run off with the money, I've seen teams just completely trash their teams because they're in a protest of a trade where they just drop all their players because they're mad. So I saw some weird things in fantasy, but I also saw the best of what fantasy offered. So meanwhile, again, in the professional career path, I still had my fantasy football league on the side, and it was so much fun. And that was kind of an outlet for me, right? It was a passion for me. It was a distraction. It was just a lot of fun. So with that home league, I just decided to, take it into my control and create it as big as I could, right? So that's where I just decided to make the home league drafts just massive, speeches and fun and decorations and logos, just so much brought into the league. And I saw how my league mates reacted. And this again is while I'm, grow in the practice. But on the side, this was my passion, and so that's where I ended up down the road winning Commissioner of the Year through ESPN, and that was a pivotal contest in kind of opening up this world to me where I could actually contribute. So obviously we'll get into that.
One of my favorite things about me doing this show, this podcast, is hearing the stories and having like memories like trigger in my brain that I've not thought about for like the longest time. So when you're saying you're essentially starting this league in like 2001 and you're in school, 2001 to what like roughly like 2005 around there, 2006. I'm starting to think back like me playing fantasy football in my home league that I started at a local sports bar, and I'm like, man, what was I doing back then? And I started thinking about how like we didn't have smartphones, we didn't have computers in our pockets, and so the first thing that popped in my head when you're kind of going this timeline is when you I don't know if everybody did this, but this is what I did. I would go to like a sports bar where all the TVs are around you, and I would have like a little pamphlet of my roster, and I would just start check marking like touchdown check, reception check, and I think I still have like the very first like season paper stuff. So it's always fun to have those memories get triggered. So another thing I was going to mention is you kind of mentioned the weird stuff you're seeing about people dropping their leagues or dropping their team from complaining and all these other things. And I mean, everybody's experienced something chaotic and just either friend leagues or family leagues or anything like that. And I think, which I don't know, let me know if you do the same thing as well, is that when you've been burnt or something chaotic has happened, you make sure you do certain things to make sure that is impossible to happen in like another league. So for example, I was just talking to you a little bit before we started recording about how I'm living in this we moved into this new house 4 months ago. This year, which I mean we're only 4 months in now, and one of the community neighborhood Facebook groups like, hey, who wants to be in a fantasy football league? And then like my devil horns come out and I'm like, they don't know who I am here yet. And so I was like making sure that everybody paid their dues before the draft that was on Sunday night. And because, I mean, I'm sure you've been in a many, many leagues as well where, the person drafts and then week one they get destroyed by 50 points and then they never pay and they never update their rosters again. So the question I want to ask you on that end is I know you have the book that you talk about like how to be a good commissioner and stuff, but do you have like, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Essentially like, uh, safe ways on to prevent this from happening, do this, and essentially like the non-paying thing as well. Like what are some of the biggest burdens or the biggest chaotic scenarios for a fantasy manager or a fantasy commissioner where you have like a to prevent this, do this scenario?
Well, yeah, there's just so many little wrinkles that we can go into.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, obviously, dues,
yeah,
money, it comes down to money first, right? That's the one where things can go haywire, right? So, like I said, I had a commissioner run off with the money. I think obviously he collected that money, spent it, and then didn't have it, and it took him, almost a year to to return and divvy out some of the funds. So obviously, money is a huge issue in fantasy if you're playing for money. And it's as simple as yes, make sure that you pay your dues before the season starts. If you don't pay your dues, you're not playing, right? That's the easiest way to make sure that there's not, chasing around, managers for money later down the road. Because commissioners can run into some issues. Well, they're in, they'll end up having to, you know, contribute more money just to keep peace within the league. So yes, get those dues in advance. But a lot of things with fantasy, it's preventing collusion, preventing cheating. You want to make sure that as a commissioner that there's some clear guidelines, obviously a constitution with clear rules with trade. So everything's just very transparent. But apathy is one of the biggest problems in a fantasy league where people are losing interest, or maybe people are playing in a lot of different fantasy leagues. They only focus on the ones that they're winning or that they enjoy the most. So if you make your league extra special, you make your league the one that everyone wants to win, they're going to be more engaged. And so engagement is really the key ingredient. You want to make sure you're doing things on a weekly basis that keeps everybody, checking in on the league. Whether it's like weekly power rankings, bringing in some humor into the league, or there's just a lot of little things you can do to spark interest in the league so people don't become apathetic and stay focused so that the league experience can be at its best.
All right, so let's get back to the timeline here. So again, you said you finished school about 24, 25, and you're doing the chiropractic journey. But you even before that point, you had that home league or that classmate league, and then you turned it into a home league after you finished. So if we're still around like age 25 here, at what point down the road, whether it's a year later, a few years later, do you actually take this commissioner like of the year award and all these other things? When does it actually become something that um, just flips a trigger in your head where it goes, I think there's a way to actually turn this into something either I can monetize or something I can actually do beyond just being a hobby?
Yeah, so I mean, it really goes from 2005 to 2015. It's about a 10-year deal where I'm, obviously trying to make my league the best it can be. And that's what, so it's 2015 where ESPN comes up with this contest, this Commissioner of the Year contest sponsored by Pizza Hut. This is, probably 5 6 years after I've been really just going all out for my league, and YouTube channel, just fun videos, just trying to make it engaged. But at this point, again, I've been playing fantasy for 20 years, loving this game so much, but I didn't realize how much was out there beyond the host websites, right? I played on Yahoo. I knew the Yahoo analysts. I played a little bit on ESPN. I knew, the ESPN analysts. Um, but beyond that, I didn't realize how much was beyond that. And so Commissioner of the Year contest comes up, and a lot of that was run through Twitter. And so basically, I had to be on Twitter more, and my league mates were nominating me. This is the way that the contest worked: was each week ESPN would name a Commissioner of the Week, and at the end of the season, they would take those 16 Commissioners of the Week and then determine one Commissioner of the Year. So fun contest, great prizes on a week to week basis. But my league mates nominating me constantly. It got some attention from a lot of people in the industry. So I had a lot of support, a lot of big names in the space that were rallying for me because they loved the videos that I was doing and the league drafts I was doing, and fantasy footballers were kind of on the rise at that point, just coming up. They were really supportive too. So a lot of people were supportive of me, and it really opened my eyes to again, all the people on the outside of this league or this industry, doing independent things, independent brands, sites like Football Guys. Like there's so many people out there, pivotal people on my path that I didn't realize existed until this Commissioner of the Year contest comes up. So ESPN, I win Commissioner of the Week one week. I get interviewed on the Fantasy Focus podcast with Field Yates and Matthew Berry and Stephania Bell. And that was huge. That was such a fun experience. Fast forward to the end of the season, they have the Commissioner of the Year announcement show. Field Yates announces that, and I was among the finalists, and then I won the award, which was just so cool because the prize package was, I mean, it was massive. Like I got like a $10,000 ring. I got custom red blazer, Commissioner of the Year. I got to fly out to Bristol and spend the day with the ESPN fantasy crew during their ranking summit. So I got to spend the day with Matthew Berry and Phil Yates and Stephania Bell and Mike Clay was there. You know, basically my childhood dreams of getting to Sports Center and ESPN. Like it was there. Like right, I got to tour the campus. I got to take those shots at the Sports Center desk, and that's when I was like, okay, like I love this experience. I love this industry. Again, all the support I was getting from people I didn't even know existed previously, even though I had loved this game so much. That's when I thought, okay, the professional career has been great. I've been doing, been in chiropractor for several years at this point. Life was good. how can I figure out a way to get involved in the fantasy industry? Because it's a game I love. It's an industry obviously I've fallen in love with. The people in it were just so great and supportive. I wanted to get involved, and so that's what really kind of was the pivotal moment in looking at this other path of things that I can do professionally, and also for fun. A lot of fun involved here, but really it was a passion project in the beginning, creating this league that turned into much more than I would have ever expected.
With the Commissioner of the Year award or even Commissioner of the Week, what were so I know that your league mates are like nominating you, but what is like the judging criteria based on for that?
So as far as I was as far as I was aware, they had a panel that would basically decide, you know, which commissioners stood out. And so I think people submitted photos, stories, videos. I mean, we did a lot of early stuff on YouTube with my home drafts. I just try to make it a spectacle. So a lot of content, and I think in those years, 2010, 2015, there wasn't as much content out there. Not everyone was living on their smartphones, and so I did create a lot of content for my league, specifically inwardly. But that's the stuff that was used to say, "Hey, look at this! Look at my commissioner! Look what he's doing!" And so I think it was just a subjective analysis from whoever was involved, as to which commissioners were clearly doing a lot for their leagues.
And when you won the Commissioner of the Year award, where you got that amazing prize package and everything, so is that still within was that 2015 that happened?
Yeah, so that was 2016 when I won the award. 2015, they had 1 year of the contest prior to when I won it. But there was a lot of it basically was like a couple year process where there was just where I was on Twitter, sharing stuff about my league, and my league mates obviously doing that same thing. So, but then when I won that award, and it kind of opened me up to this world. It was the same time, I guess it was the following year that the National Fantasy Football Convention took place in Dallas. And so I took a couple of my buddies down there, just again, fresh off this award. There's gonna be a lot of analysts down there, a lot of industry people down there, and a lot of fun. My buddies just wanted to get down there and get some Texas barbecue, and I was like, yeah, I want to meet some of these people. So a lot of people that were supportive of me that maybe I hadn't met in person. That was a cool opportunity to get down there and meet more people in the industry, and that really solidified, the path I wanted to go with this.
So having that, like, I mean, adrenaline rush of getting like flown to Bristol when you win this Commissioner of the Year award, and then also taking upon yourself to get you and some friends, some league mates going to that convention. Did you, at what point, or actually during this entire point, whether it was the Bristol trip, the award, or this convention, I understand that you have passion beyond the commissioner side of things now. You're like, oh, like I'm like people actually know me because I was interviewed for this and I won the entire award, so I'm on a little bit slightly higher pedestal than I was before, and I have more uh, awareness to my I guess you can say your personal brand. At what point did you start thinking about how you can use that leverage into doing something beyond what you're already kind of doing that won the award in the first place?
Yeah, so obviously when pre award, it was really inwardly facing, let's just make my league fun for my league mates. It wasn't for anyone else, right? It was for my league mates, just trying to get the most out of the fantasy experience. Once I won the award and I realized like how much, support was out there, that's what it essentially tipped me to looking into how can I get involved? What can I do? And the one thing that I was really consistent with early on was just supporting others. I loved the industry. I loved the people in it, and I was suddenly exposed to just so much content beyond what I knew was out there. And so I naturally just wanted to support others. I guess professionally, that's what I did. I cared for others. I just want to see people get better, when it comes to their health. I want to help people. And so naturally in the fantasy space, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted just to help people get their content out there. For me, I felt like with fantasy, I think you get more out of the experience the deeper you fall in love with the game as well. And so I wanted people to discover the resources that I was just recently discovering. I wanted people to find, the football guys. I wanted people to dive on to Sirius XM radio and just dive in and find more fantasy football resources. And so naturally supporting others, you know, retweeting other people's content, providing positive feedback for people that were, small creators looking to grow. And so I kind of just did a lot of that. That was kind of my position in the space for many years, is people just thought, okay, I was just the guy that was bringing positive energy and supporting people. And so it naturally fit into what I ended up deciding to do. And it was creating Fantasy Football Unlimited, which is a website that's basically like a portal into the space. It's got links to every, resource out there, different categories, whether it's different podcasts, YouTube channels, commissioner content. It's basically, when you go onto the site, it's just links to other people's content. And that's again what I found was the best place for me. I wasn't gonna I didn't have the time to become an analyst and get into analysis, because again, had a professional career at the same time, but I could support others and I could share content. And so that's where the website came. And from there, it was several years of just trying to figure out, how can I balance things, right? I have family, I have my professional career. How can I also do more in fantasy? And finally got to the point where I had to start the podcast. And so eventually started the podcast, and that's where it really kind of came together, with again sharing people's stories, sharing resources in the industry. And that was a lot of fun putting that together. You had mentioned earlier, I was kind of in a unique position when it comes to just suddenly being able to know a lot of people and have some authority of a topic. And I've seen that there's so many people in the fantasy space that have, that just are grinding, trying to grow, but they don't have the connections. Fortunately for me, through those experiences, and obviously, just trying to be a positive force in the space, I met a lot of great people. So it was easier to launch the podcast and get, big names on there to help share their stories, which again has just further helped, where I've taken this.
I think the two biggest takeaways from all that there was something that I feel like needs to be stressed a lot for people who are at least at minimum interested in the space, whether it's the sports betting or fantasy sports side, is if you are interested and you know you want to do something in the space, even if you don't have an idea and you don't have a company and you just want to be part of the space and maybe meet someone that'll help you spark an idea. Because like what Kevin was just saying, you're just saying that you were going to these conferences with zero agenda. You just knew that you were fascinated by the industry, and by, I mean, fantasy sports in general. And so like going to things, I mean, from a fan perspective, like for fantasy sports, that fantasy football expo in Canton every single year, that's definitely needs to be on your to-do list. If it's more on the businessy side of things, you can start sprinkling in other things like the FSGA, the Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association. They have two of these in North America or United States every single year. It's just, if you, even if you don't have a concept, but you know you want to have a concept, or you know you want to have an idea, go to these things, meet these people, network, and then just like there may be one random conversation you have having coffee with somebody you've never met before on day two morning of this event, and then all of a sudden boom, you have an idea because you took it upon yourself to get to these events. Now on the flip side of that, I do understand that these are not the most inexpensive events that you can possibly attend, so it is the cost side of things. But as you see by Kevin's example here, that taking it upon himself to go to these events helped kind of get him to the network, the backing, the relationships to launching that podcast. And my next question for you, Kevin, is what years, just so I can keep the chronological timeline on track here, of uh, winning that, going from the Bristol, meeting everybody, winning that Commissioner of the Year award, to actually doing a lot of stuff in the space, being present a lot of the stuff in the space, to actually launching like the very first episode of this new podcast idea. What was that timeline like? Was it like very soon after that Bristol trip, or was there like a few years in between?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting timeline, because it was a slow process. Really, the ESPN Commissioner of the Year contest was 2016. So the 2016 season, I went to Bristol in the spring of 2017. So that's when, there's just a ton of excitement around just the award. That was really, early 2017. National Fantasy Football Convention was 2018. So the following year, that's where it was like, okay, let's let's follow this passion, see, see where we can go with it. And really after that experience, that's when I was like, okay, you know, you gotta follow this, figure out where you want to go. So that's when I created Fantasy Football Unlimited. It was 2018, I believe. And I joined FSGA in 2019. Again, not with, a big backing, not with a big brand. The funniest part is going to 2019's summer FSGA conference in New York. I went there and there was, not a lot of people I knew, but I knew some big people. I knew Matthew Berry. I knew, Mike Clay was there. I knew the fantasy footballers. But the first things they said to me at that time were, "Hey, Kevin, great that you're here. Why are you here?" Right? Like you're just the guy that loves this industry and is really supportive. Like, what are you even doing here at this industry event? So it was kind of taking that leap, going there solo. Um, and seeing where I could take it. I mean, it's important for people to find a passion and figure out a path towards chasing that passion. And so FSJ was huge for that. Obviously, like you said, it's not inexpensive, but it's worth flirting with. It's worth checking it out to see, because like you said, conversations from those events, I've witnessed so many of those conversations for other people at like an FSJ or at the expo that have just launched career paths that people didn't expect. So many great relationships happen in those events. So you got to put yourself in those positions. So I joined FSJ 2019, went in 2020. Obviously COVID happened, but I kept going to these FSJ conferences, meeting more people. The expo began in what, 2020, 2021, 2020. um, Went to that again, met more and more people. And so the podcast I ended up starting was, I believe, 2022. It was several years of just kind of being in the space, supporting others, promoting the website that I created. But there wasn't a lot that came from that aside from commissioner content that I put on the site. So it was a slow process of figuring out professionally how I can balance things. And so it was really 2022 when I started the podcast. Fortunately, in 2023, I won an FSGA award for best startup podcast video. And again, for being somebody that was just kind of a fan, a consumer, to someone who kind of took the leap to, hey, let's go to FSGA, see what that's like. And then again, having that chance to win an award against some big competition in that space, was it all kind of came together. It was really surreal. And the coolest part of that experience was just there were so many people in that room that just were so happy for me, because they saw that, they knew the journey from the beginning to that point. So I highly recommend getting uncomfortable, putting yourself in a position where you can make things happen. And because if you're just sitting on the sidelines, it's just not going to work out.
So I was in the back of my mind when we first started recording this. I was trying to remember. I go, when was the first time that you and I like ran into each other? And I mean, because I'm going, I mean, you as well, going to all these conferences in the industry, and like FSJ's got 2 times a year, and this one's got here and there, and blah blah blah. And then you kind of said your first FSGA conference was summer New York 2019. I go, oh, that answers that question, because that was actually my second one, because I think the winter one that year was in Tampa, which, me being in Central
Hmm.
Florida, it was an easy drive. And so yeah, so that's, man, it's been like 6 years since we first ran into each other. And then that other thing I was going to mention, which I know you were kind of doubling down what I was saying about, like, just have conversations with people, meet people. In that exact conference in New York in 2019, Digger, who's been with FSGA, I don't even know if it's from the beginning, but for the longest time, like, we were at the hotel bar of the hotel for that industry conference, and we spent like 3 hours just talking about both of us having equal fascination for musical theater and Broadway shows. And all of a sudden, that me and Dick are best friends. And like, it doesn't, the conversations don't have to spiral into business related things. It's just the relationships that you can have just from talking to people. And then one of the biggest things you said that I want to get like tattooed on my forehead is, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's the only way growth can happen. And so, yeah, just try to try to network. If you can't get yourself to FSGA, find something else, whether it's just going to the Fantasy Football Expo, or just do something, be a part of something, meet new people, and you never know where those networks can happen. I mean, there's things that are happening now in 2025, relationships that of somebody that I met like 6 years ago that I'm like now coming into the fold, because you never know when you can call upon those old relationships. But so we're in 2022. You're launching the podcast. Boom. You're getting an award, the startup award at FSGA for that podcast you launched. Do you How much of that award, how much of the initial success do you award to the network that you created prior to launching, or the network and I guess the solo brand, and your overall personal exposure to the industry? How much do you credit that effort you put in prior to launching the podcast?
Yeah, I mean it's really it's everything. It's to me that that award it wasn't for me it was more the concept of the people behind, the people that I'm interviewing. Those are the stars of the show. You know what I mean? I fortunately had got to meet so many great people in the space that were just excited to come on because because of the relationships that had been established. And so I had just an incredible lineup of guests. I've probably interviewed 150 people in the space, and it's everybody in the space that's made a huge impact on this in this industry have probably been on the show. I mean, there's a few people left on the list that I have to get on, those are the stars of the show. And if I hadn't made those relationships, it would have just been another you know interview show, right? But it was really those people that made this show. All the work that went ahead of starting the podcast. The podcast has been easy. I get to talk to my friends, talk to people that I admire, help share their stories. But it was really just the networking, the meeting people prior to the show that really kind of put me in a position to have that ability to connect with people quite easily.
So we're only about 3 years now from the launch of the podcast to where we are right now talking about it. So from the initial concept of this is what I think the podcast should be, from you doing episode one to where you are now, still with the podcast, what are like the key changes or the key growth from where you originally thought it should be to where you're actually what it actually is today?
Yeah, when I first started out, I thought that I would be doing more, commissioner content, league advice, and mixing in interviews. But it really has become, primarily an interview-based show where I'm, again, sharing backstories. But I do want to also mix in the love of the game. I want to hear where people's passion is for the game. So there is some kind of league advice, league commissioner advice mixed in there. There's been a slow evolution of different segments in the show, but it's been fun. It's been fun to kind of form it, over the last few years, and just make it a little different, but still keep that same theme of showcasing the people behind the mic on the other side. Their brands, their products. I want people, again, and the mission is the same. I want people to discover new analysts, new resources in fantasy to just fall deeper in love with the game. I think that people become more involved in fantasy when they connect with analysts. You see, audiences like the fantasy footballers audience. I mean, they're just dedicated to the footballers, right? It's because of that connection they have with the analysts. Whereas somebody that doesn't really have a podcast they follow, they might be more, kind of hit or miss when it comes to their passion for fantasy. I think if you can connect with analysts that you like and get entertainment out of it, then I think you're going to love the game more. So I want people just to experience the best of fantasy. I think that if they connect with analysts and discover new resources, it'll keep them more engaged with the game, which will again kind of lead towards better engagement in a fantasy league, better camaraderie, better connection. I want people to care more about the league experience than winning the championship, right? Everyone wants to win the championship, but only one person out of 12 or one person out of 10 is going to get that. So you got to enjoy the ride, along the way. And I think that by falling deeper in love with fantasy and the experience, it helps everybody stay better connected, and I think connection is the key with this great game. And the more a league can stay together and thrive over time, the more you're going to be in people's lives and stay connected. And this world needs that right now, you know?
I think so. I 100% understand the concept of enjoy the league, not just the first place finish. But I don't know if you can talk me off that hill. I feel like the entire year for me is like it's wasted. Like we have to go back to the drawing board for next season, whether it's a second place finish or missing the playoffs altogether. So now in 2025, we're still practicing. We now have a podcast that has 3 years of growth. You have industry awards to back it up. You also have the book, the commissioner's book that is available as well. Is that essentially available on all places people find books, or is there a specific location to find that?
Yeah, Amazon is where you're gonna find it on Fantasy Football Unlimited on the website as well. But Amazon, it's in paperback, hardcover, ebook, and there's even an audio book that they created. I mean, it's not the best when it comes to the AI version of audio, but I didn't put it together, but they did. And if you need to listen in audio form, it's available for you. But that's the book has been obviously the passion over the last year. But what really changed is in 2024 we sold the practice. I still work because I love caring for patients. I love my community. I'm still in the office 2.5 days a week. But really got to a point where after 20 years, we're in a great position to again focus more on family time, but also do more in fantasy. And so, really, selling the practice was huge. Never would have pictured selling it, when I'm in my mid 40s, back in the beginning. But my wife is, I mean, she's a go-getter when it comes to business and investments and everything. She put us in a really good position to have that open up where we could sell the practice. I could still kind of hang around and enjoy that aspect of my life and in that professional career. But also opens me up to do more in fantasy. And really with that open time that I had, come the spring of 2024, that's when I really started doing more with putting the plans together for the book. And so this last year really focused on trying to put together the best guide that I could for commissioners. And that's been the focus. And so, it became on sale, or it was mid or July 22nd is when it went on sale. So up until that point, it was just working back and forth with each chapter. I mean, 60 chapters in the book, 450 pages. It's a doozy, but it's comprehensive. And I wanted to just make the best guide I could. And so now it's about spreading the word. Again, I want people to open up this book and figure out ways to make their leagues more fun. I think that there's value to that. I think that fantasy football, like I said, it's about those connections, and you want an engaged league. You want to get the most out of fantasy. I want people to experience what I have with fantasy all these years, and I think that this book does quite a bit to do that.
So sold to practice, but still practicing, but kind of on your own terms, your own time
Yep.
when available. So one of the questions I like ending the episodes on is if you were to take your entire life spectrum from what the very first thing you told us to now in 2025, there's a lot of things that happen, whether it's decisions that were in your control or decisions outside your control, things that we refer to as the butterfly effect. Now, if you were to attribute one specific butterfly effect, whether it was something that was in your control or outside of your control, to where you are today, what is the very single option, the very direct butterfly effect that you attribute to the success where you're at here?
It's a good question. I think that it's interesting to look back, over all these years. There are so many moments that were pivotal in kind of shaping direction. Obviously, meeting my wife, getting married, that really changed my direction. Again, it wasn't for her family, you know, knowing a chiropractor. If it wasn't for her being her going to the chiropractor, probably wouldn't have chosen that path. I don't think that would have been on my radar. And so that path really changed everything because again, it allowed me to, grow more of an entrepreneurial spirit, you know, be independent, be a business owner. Um, and again with all her, I mean, she's the one that ran everything behind the scenes. So really her her influence on my life has just been you know immeasurable. But I wouldn't have, again, chosen that path, which gave me the flexibility to pursue my passion with fantasy. I wouldn't have, the first chiropractor I ever met, it was through her. She met, she met a chiropractor at her college who was there doing like a screening. And he was helping with the lacrosse team, and that's the guy I met, and he's the one that sent me to the chiropractic school I went to. When I was in chiropractic school, he was the guy that I joined a high stakes league, and he was actually in the league, right? And so many different pivotal moments, but I mean, obviously, she was the one that really changed my trajectory the most.
Well, if she watches this episode, which I'm sure she will, you're going to get brownie points for that one. But Kevin, thank you again for sharing your story here with us. You guys, as you mentioned before, if you want to check out that Commissioner Playbook, it is available on Amazon. I'm trying to think here. I did have like one small question on the last thing you said was, do you remember if there's somebody that like set you up or introduced you to her in high school?
Oh, I mean, we can get into a whole other
Yeah, I
hour
was
about
like, because if
how I
that's the
pursued
case, then
her.
like, yeah.
No, we had gone to school together since junior high, but we didn't really know each other until I she caught my eye and I pursued her, like in the between junior and senior year of high school. So, a fun story. We'll get to that some other time.
That's on the follow up. But yeah, thank you again for Kevin for sharing your time. If you want to, you see his name spelled as it is on the screen. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can shoot him a connection request if you want to connect with him on LinkedIn. But I can't guarantee you who'll accept it. That's up to him, not up to you or not up to me. But if you are interested in seeing more episodes, there's a lot more on this same channel, no matter where you're listening to or watching this. Just make sure you subscribe. Every Tuesday morning, a new one drops at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. Kevin, appreciate your time. Thanks for being here.
That was a pleasure.